Anyway, welcome everyone to the December meeting of the Historical Society of Old Abington, and welcome to those on cable who will join us remotely for some time to come, and also on YouTube, as it turns out lately. We've gone really high-tech, so it's kind of fun. My name is Doug Ulwick. I'm the president of the Historical Society of Old Abington, and I welcome you here today. We're very excited about the program we have to offer, but we always start with a salute to the flag. So if you would join me by standing if you choose. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So for those of you who might not be familiar with our program, who are here just because you heard about this one, we run a series of conversations throughout the year, three in the fall and 3 in the spring. So this is our last of our fall semester, and it's the first Sunday of every month, unless it conflicts with Easter. And it doesn't this coming year, so we're good. But anyway, so we're finishing up with this program about St. Bridget Parish. And then next season, we skip January and February. We used to only skip January, but one February meeting, and I think we canceled like 3 times. That was the Rockland Congregational one, and Janet's right over here who helped run it. Yeah, so after that we said, let's skip January and February. And so now we started meeting again March, April, May. And we have some interesting programs coming up for that. We have one on nurseries and greenhouses coming up. We have one on the blizzard of '78, I believe, which is, we just missed the anniversary by a year. But that's okay. Enough people lived through it that there's enough interest in it, so we're doing that. And we'll end the season with one that I'm excited about all of them, but I'm really excited about this one because it took a bit to make it come together. There was a motorcycle made in Abington. Some of you know there was a car made in Abington, but there was also a motorcycle made in Abington. There is one complete version of it known in existence. It's in Canada, owned by Rick Wolf. And for our March, April, May meeting, Rick is bringing it down from Canada. Wow. And going to have it on display here. I may, depending upon how big that meeting is, we may move to a different meeting hall, because we'll be inviting the motorcycle groups as well to come see this. I say motorcycle, it looks like a bicycle with an engine on it, but the engine right in the castings says Abington, Massachusetts. So cool. It's quite exciting to see. And we supplied a lot of the background information about the maker to Rick, so he was very, very grateful for that. And I asked him what it would take to get him to bring it down here, and he just said, I'll just do it. So I'm very grateful that he's going to extend that effort for us. So that's coming up then. I'm making my regular appeal for volunteers. We have a lot of work that we do here in conjunction with the Dyer Memorial Library. We coexist in this building, the Historical Society of Old Abington and the Dyer Memorial Library. Our collections are both separate and commingled, and we have to like each other, but we do, so that's really good. But there's a whole bunch of volunteer possibilities. In fact, I think I just solved one today. We had been getting obituaries from the Patriot Ledger, which help with the genealogical collection, and the folks who had been supplying them aren't going to be subscribing to the paper anymore. So I think it was Van, where's Van? Right over there, who said he was going to fill in with that. So one volunteer thing down and many, many, many to go. So if you have any interest in volunteering, any special talents you may have, we probably have a use for them. So let me know, or let Merlin know, who's sitting there at the desk. She is our librarian. I'm missing part of the title. Librarian?
An archivist.
An archivist, okay. I knew there was part of the title I was missing. So anyway, so if you wanted to talk to Merlin and myself, as I said, we have plenty of assignments that need doing. So always something to stay busy with here at the Dyer. Anyway, so without further ado, today's program is about St. Bridget's. We normally feature a church every year and rotate through the 3 towns. We service Abington, Rockland, and Whitman, the old town, and it was one town until the 1870s. But we try to feature a church in December. Seems like a good time to go out to a church and see all the greenery and see all the Christmas decorations. And so we were planning it and said, St. Bridget's, they had just had an anniversary not that long ago. They put a book out, and let's go to St. Bridget's. Well, guess what? St. Bridget's is doing baptisms this afternoon. So we're not at St. Bridget's, we're here, but we're talking about St. Bridget's, and we have a perfect person to do it. So I'd like to ask Robert Kelly to come forward, who is an expert on the topic. I met Robert a few years ago when I was working with the Tricentennial Committee here at Abington, and I know him as a CPA and a few other titles. He was treasurer for the Tricentennial Committee, and you have a list of accreditations longer than my arm. Are there any that you particularly want the crowd to know about, or are you just going to be terribly modest today?
I also did the 275th
Oh,
and the 300th.
see? Okay.
I was a director of the Abington Bank. I was the treasurer of the vocational school in Hanover. I'm deputy town moderator.
See?
Been on the finance committee. I do a few things around town, right, Jan?
Just a few.
Yeah. But I appreciate you asking me to come.
Glad to have you here today.
This has been an interesting project. The problem with the Catholic Church is they never appoint an historian. And it appears, from what I've been able to find out, whenever they get a new pastor, they throw everything out from the old pastor.
Well, of course, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know. I went to the church and I asked for the folder on the history of the church, and it's that big. And I had more in my house I did the 150th anniversary. I was the master of ceremonies for that. And I'd done some work back then, and my folder was bigger. But it's been an interesting month or so. I was able to do some research that I hadn't done 5 years ago. I've got some prepared things that I'd like to go through. They're just notes, but they have a lot of dates and things in them that I want you to understand. And I'm not that good at remembering dates anymore since my hair turned gray.
You've got hair. Don't complain, please. Come on. We have, actually, Bob had prepared a PowerPoint presentation, so I thought we'd actually go through the slides. We're probably going to interact a little more than he's used to doing, because this is a conversation as opposed to a lecture, but we'll bring it up on screen. I'm doing computer work here in the background. Now I'll bring the projector up. Kind of lights up right behind you there. Didn't expect to be called into service, did you? But thank you. And I think there's even some back here that probably contributed. No one knows where that switch is, don't tell them. Okay, come on. And I think we want the hallway lights out too, Merlin, if you could help with that. Thank you. Seeing a lot of glare coming from there. Okay. We kind of look like we know what we're doing all of a sudden, huh? So, you started this project because of the anniversary.
Yes.
But you had materials before then?
No.
Oh, okay, so you started from scratch.
Yes.
And you came here, and you went to the church archives.
There was nothing here.
There was nothing here, yeah.
There was nothing at the church.
Well, you're changing that. So.
Yeah, yes, I hope so. There is some information at the Archdiocese of Boston, but it's mainly the names and dates of the priests that served the parish.
Sure.
There's nothing about when it was built, or I mean, there is something about when it was built, but excuse me, there are no plans, no original plans. There's nothing on the stained glass windows, like why they were designed that way, or what is supposed to be there on the windows.
Now, the Congregationalists, of course, had a foothold in town. They basically formed the town. Yeah. And by the time St. Bees came along, which I understand wasn't going to be St. Bees, but we'll come back to that in just a second. We already had, the old town already had 4 congregational churches. Yep. Center, South Parish, which became Whitman, East Parish, which became Rockland, and North Parish, which never formed a separate town. It was just the North Congregational Church. Universalist Church had already come to town. They were fairly early on, but the Catholics were the newcomers.
Yes.
And it wasn't easy, from what I understand. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, the basic thing that got the Catholics here, especially the Irish Catholics, was the railroad. The railroad came to Abington in 1845, and a lot of those people that worked on the railroad stayed. And then,
because this is the idyllic town that it is.
Well, apparently they liked it for some
They wanted to
reason.
get out of the city.
And yeah, that probably was it. And of course, between 1845 and 1849, you have the Irish potato famine.
Mm-hmm.
And so the people that stayed for the railroad then attracted their relatives. By 1850, there were about 6% Irish immigrants. I'm assuming they were mostly Catholics in the town. Out of 5,000 people, about 300 Irish. And at that time, they were being serviced by St. Mary's Church in Quincy. They would send somebody down maybe once every 2 months. It was not frequent.
Okay.
To take care of baptisms, marriages, and births. Baptisms, marriages, and deaths. The problem with the deaths is they didn't have a cemetery. And this was totally Protestant country.
Mm-hmm.
And
couldn't bury in those cemeteries.
No, it wasn't going to happen. So they happened upon the land in East Abington, or Rockland, 7 acres. They purchased 7 acres of land there in the late 1840s, and they dedicated it in 1850. And the purpose of the land was 6 acres were going to be cemetery, and 1 acre was going to be the church. So they had named the cemetery was going to be St. Patrick's Cemetery, and it was going to be St. Patrick's Church. It was not going to be St. Bridget's. It was supposed to be St. Patrick's. The day after the cemetery was consecrated, Bishop Fitzpatrick from the Archdiocese, for some reason, didn't like the site for a church. He said, "You can keep it as a cemetery, but I don't want the church here."
Something about those East Abington people?
I have nothing written
we don't know.
It's just, again,
lost to us in history.
It's lost. And,
yeah.
And again, the priests and the bishops could basically do what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, he didn't like the way it looked. He said, "You can keep it as a cemetery, but I don't want the church here, so find another site." Now, the problem was we're now into the 1850s, and there's more Irish immigrants, and the nativists are getting very active. The Know Nothing Party has started, and they didn't want anything to do with Catholics. So the Catholics were having a very hard time finding another site for the church. In the meantime, what happened is they were being served. St. Mary's in Quincy built St. Mary's in Randolph, so that the parishioners were getting a priest once a month that would come out here from Randolph, and he would say Mass either in a home or in the old Lyceum Hall, which used to stand, Townhouse Lyceum Hall.
Mm-hmm.
It used to stand just on the other side of the railroad tracks up the street from St. Bridget's, going west.
Actually, if you're coming up Park Avenue from Island Grove
Yeah.
towards Central Street, the street with the
Right.
church on it, and you hit Central Street, basically right across the street, just
Right.
to that side of the railroad tracks, stood Lyceum Hall.
Right, and just to the left of that is a residence. The Halls used to live there. I don't know whether anybody remember Eddie Hall, but it's rumored that that's where the first masses occurred. We're in that house, although Mary
I
Rourke.
was going to say, it's one of the two stories.
Although Mary Rourke says that the masses occurred in her right living room,
In her parlor.
in her parlor, in that house. So. And I never argued with Mrs. Rourke.
Well, we lost her this year, so she's not here to
I know,
scold
if she
you.
was here, she'd be scolding
She
me.
probably still is.
But so during that time, that's what was happening. And if you wanted to go to church during the month, you had to walk. And a number of Abington people did walk to Randolph, go to Mass, and come back, which I found very interesting. I mean, it's a whole day, but they were very devoted back then. And it's really interesting reading some of the things that they did right. Well, anyways, not around, but in April of 1862, we found a piece of property in Abington, or the Catholics did. And that's an interesting story because anecdotally, everybody had told me that the Catholics had used a straw to buy St. Bridget's property where it is today, or it should have been St. Patrick's. I have to back up. It's not St. Patrick's because during the time, between 1850 and 1862, when we were looking for land, they built a St. Patrick's Church in Brockton.
Too close.
In 1856. And the diocese said you cannot have another St. Patrick's because you have one in the adjoining community. So they picked the second most popular saint in Ireland, St. Bridget's at that point. But so they found the property, and I had always thought that, well, people had told me a straw bought it, that somebody had set the Protestants up and they thought they were selling it to a Protestant person, but it really ended up with the Catholic hands. And I was never able to have time to figure it out. And doing some research on this, I talked to John Buckley Jr., who's the Register of Deeds, and he and I were sitting down and we figured out what happened, which I think is kind of interesting. The property where St. Bridget's Church is now was called the Jesse Dunham Estate. And Jesse Dunham's wife wanted to sell the property. And she sold it on April 23rd, 1862 to a Zibian Packet for $500.
Pay close attention to the dollar amounts.
Yeah, because they get interesting. For $500. A Zibian, I Googled and I searched Benjamin Hobart's history, and Zibian Packet was the scribe of the First Parish Church in the late 1820s and the early 1830s.
As congregational as you get.
Yeah,
yes.
so I mean, it means he was really into the Protestant stuff. I was also able to track down that he died in 1876 at the age of 92 and was buried in Mount Vernon Cemetery, which again would definitely say he was not Catholic. So it was interesting that this person was the person that
made the purchase.
Made the purchase. Now the person who set him up, his name was Joseph Hunt. And I haven't been able to find much about Joseph Hunt. I believe he was either a Catholic or there were a number of Hunts who ran some shoe factories, shoe manufacturing factories at that time. And maybe he employed the Irish, and maybe he felt sympathetic towards them that they needed a church in town. I tried to track him to St. Patrick's Cemetery, and there's no record of a Joseph Hunt. There are Hunts, but not him. He definitely did not go to Mount Vernon. So maybe he went somewhere else. But anyways, my theory is that Joseph Hunt was looking for property, and the priest that serviced Abington at this time was in Randolph. I think he went to the priest and he said, I think I got a piece of property, the Dunhams want to sell it, and I think I can get it done if you give me permission to do it. It's going to cost you some money. And so apparently the priest said, okay. So Packet, Hunt went to Packet and said, I got a deal for you. I can double your money in one day. Right? And like good congregationalists, I guess, Packet said, that's not enough. So what they agreed upon was Packet bought the property from the Dunhams on April 23rd for $500, 1862. The same day, later on, I assume it was later in the day, but the same day, Packet sold the property to Joseph Hunt for $1,300.
Tidy profit.
He made $800, and back then an annual salary was around under $300 a year for a family. So he made $800, more than double his money in one day, which I thought was funny. For some reason, then Hunt waited a day. And I've been unable to determine why he would wait the day. Some people said, well, maybe it was trouble getting people with signatures. I think he was trying to hide the sale from Packet, because the next step he sold to somebody named A.L. Roche of Randolph. And he sold it to Roche for $1,800. So he made $500, and Packet made $800, and A.L. Roche was the pastor of St. Mary's Church in Randolph, who was the guy who built St. Bridget's in Abington. So he paid $1,800 for a piece of property that was worth $500 24 hours earlier. But
well, worth is all relative. It's worth what you'll pay for it.
Yes, and apparently they were able to finally accomplish their purpose of getting the property so they could build a church. But I thought that was interesting. It took me a long time to figure that out. No one.
And this is the church they built.
Yes. So that's the church, and this is the Jesse Dunham house, which they used as a rectory.
It was already there.
It was already there, so they used it as a rectory until 1904. And this carriage house was here until the 90s. They moved it around behind the church. I don't know whether anybody remember. It was behind the church in the parking lot, and it did disappear in the 90s. This picture shows it before the railroad came through. So the church is level with the street. In 1898, the road was lowered because the old Colony Railroad felt there were too many accidents at the intersection.
I think the railroad was here when this was done.
Yes.
The railroad predated
Yes.
the church,
It
but
did.
they hadn't dropped the road at this
Right.
point.
And
Right.
all I could find is that they felt there were too many accidents, maybe because of the church, because of the increased activity that was going on there. I don't know. But the steeple There's absolutely no record of what happened to it. Again, anecdotally, they tell me it rotted. I thought maybe it could have blown off. I mean, back in those days, steeples did blow off. It was wooden, and it rotted, and they decided not to replace it. They did take this cross from the back and move it to the front, and that's where the cross came from that's there today. Trying to think if there's anything else important about this picture. Well, I want to talk about that building.
Mm-hmm. Is that on the next slide?
Yeah, is it? Well, next slide is the interior of the church, I think.
No, it's
yeah,
the
that's
building.
next. Okay, let's talk about the building.
This is the Dunham building.
Yes, the Dunham building. Go back to that other one for a second.
There you go.
The Dunham building is on the corner, as you can see, across from Mrs. Rourke's house diagonally. And in 1904, the parishioners decided that this thing was getting run down and we need a better place for our priests. So they decided to build a new rectory. And what happened is the rectory was put in right around here, as it is today, as you see. That was in 1904. For some reason, they wanted to save the building.
Because they were good Yankees and they saved everything.
I don't know.
Yes.
I have no reason.
No, it's true.
But this building has been in 3 locations. That's the first one.
Mm-hmm.
What they did is they cut it in half and put some logs under it and rolled it north on Plymouth Street to about where the convent is, or the convent friary building is today. It was in the front there. So they rolled it back in 1904 to its second location.
But it was still on the same lot, wasn't it?
Same lot, same
Okay.
lot. But
They
I don't
just
know what
moved
I talked to Esther Griffin. I was hoping she could tell me what it was used for, but she didn't remember either. Because what happened next is in 1965, the church decided to build the convent, and the building was in the way. So, again, this is pure anecdotal evidence. I have no proof of this, but it appears that Henry Cahill, if you knew Henry, decided he could use the building. He wanted to use it for rental property. And according to what I've been able to find out of the church, they were just wanting to get rid of it. They didn't want to demolish it or invest the money. They didn't need it. It was run down. So Henry offered to take it. And when Henry started, I don't know where he was going to move it, but wherever it was a distance. And when he started looking into how to move the building, he found out that you have to move all the telephone wires, the electric wires, and pay the utility companies to do that. So he got upset and decided he wasn't going to do it. Now, he was on the security committee at the North Abington Cooperative Bank with Huey Cox and Vincent Griffin. The 3 of them would go out every week and look at properties. And I'll guarantee you that Henry started talking to Vincent Griffin about he was lamenting that he couldn't afford all this money, and what am I going to do, and I'd really like to use the property. And I think Vincent went back and talked to his 2 brothers, Larry and Jimmy, James, and they decided that they could take the property because what they had planned to do is across the street, and the address is 392 Plymouth. I think they called it the Wilson's people or something, but they took the building, cut it in half, and put it on a trailer, and they pushed it across the street. They only had to move the wires once to get across Plymouth Street. And they dragged it through these people's yard, the Wilsons, down back behind Bellows Circle until they hit the dairy.
Their own land.
Their own land. And then they took 2 Caterpillar tractors and pushed and pulled the trailer all the way across the dairy property to Patterson Street. And
which is where it stands today.
There it is right now today, on Patterson Street.
So on Patterson Street, we have the original Dunham Estate,
Right.
which actually, Dunham House, which became the first rectory for not St. Patrick's, St. Bridget's.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
we got to keep all this stuff straight here.
It's still there, and it's still rent, and they used it for rental property up until the day they died.
And it was probably worth more than $1,800 too.
Yes, it was. It was. I just find it interesting that it never got demolished. For some reason, everybody wanted to keep this building. I do know it has a lot of apartments in it, because it goes out, it's like double the size out back. But if you ever take a ride by there, it's kind of interesting that that's the 3rd place it's been in 150, 175 years.
An otherwise unremarkable building
A lot of people
from the
don't realize what it
mid-1800s.
is, yeah. And if you look at it, it even looks the same. If you go back and forth real quick.
Sure.
I mean, well, that's not the good.
No,
we have
it's
a
a
good
bad
picture.
view of
Yeah,
it.
we have a good view later on if you ever did that one. I don't know. But it's exactly the same. It hasn't changed.
Great.
So that's the Jesse Dunham estate. So then we can talk a little bit about the interior This is a picture from 1880, and again, the church, and I can't figure out why. It's got to be because each pastor comes in and does his own thing. The church was constantly evolving on the interior. This is 1880, which is only 17 years after it was consecrated. And it now has gas lights right there, down the center of the pews. The pew configuration is the same. It also has these two statues here that I think, we're going to show a picture later on. When the church opened, up next to this is the Good Shepherd stained glass window. Up here on either side of the Good Shepherd, there were two statues. And I think they ended up here, but I'm not sure. But anyways, the statues at the top. On the left-hand side was St. Philomena. And on the right-hand side was Anne, the mother of Mary. I understood Anne, the mother of Mary, because that's Immaculate Conception, and the Marian devotion back then was very popular. Philomena, I have no idea why they would pick Philomena. St. Philomena was a Greek princess alive around 200, 300 AD, and her family took her to Rome, and the Roman emperor at the time, Diocletian, decided he wanted to marry her. He thought she was beautiful. And she was 13 years old and had pledged virginity and was going to be a holy person, and said no. He kept pressing her, and she still said no. So what he did, he said, okay, I'm gonna kill you. And so he went and he scourged her first, and after he had scourged her, some angels showed up from heaven and healed her. This is not my story. This is so he scourged her, and this angel showed up and healed her. He then tied an anchor around her neck and threw her in the Tiber River. And she went down to the bottom, I guess, and all of a sudden some angels came and picked her up and flew her up to the side of the Tiber River and took the anchor off.
He just couldn't kill her.
Oh, it gets better.
Okay. That's pretty good already.
Yeah, well, then he decided he was going to shoot her with arrows.
Oh, well, there you go.
So he lined up his archers and he shot her with arrows. And as soon as he did, the angel showed up and took all the arrows out and mended her.
I think I would have given up at this point.
Oh, no, then he did it again.
Okay.
He shot her with arrows a second time. And all the arrows, they just took left turns. They didn't even touch her.
Okay.
So he still wasn't happy, so the third time he shot her again with arrows. And this time the arrows turned around and came back and killed his archers.
Oh my goodness.
So the end of the story was he had enough of that and he decapitated her.
I'm surprised the axe worked.
I guess it did. But the only thing I can figure, in 1837 or so, somebody found what they thought was her relics, or in a catacomb, her remains.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of controversy of it. There was some, she was attributed to do some miracles back then. And Gregory VI in 1847 gave her a day. August 10th was her day to celebrate. And maybe she was the saint of the day to these people.
Flavor of the month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I can think of. No one, I've talked to the priests, and no one else can figure out why they would pick St. Philomena.
To be here.
To be here in St. Bridget's Church. But she was there, and she was on the left, and Mary was on the, Anne was on the right.
There's other stuff going, I mean, this is a drawing, obviously, as opposed to a photograph, but there's a lot of detail in it.
Yeah, the ornate top of the altar is something that is really...
Right. We do have, I referenced this online, after this show, we have some glass negative images that were here at the Dyer that have been scanned and digitized. And we're going to share some of those with you. So you're actually going to see actual photographs of the interior.
And the detail is better than this, but just to give you an idea of how the thing is. And also over here, I forgot to mention, this is the pulpit.
In a side aisle, as opposed to being in the center. That's unusual.
It's like 5 steps up, and this is the only picture I've seen where I can see a pulpit.
Now, also this one, and this is something I discovered in the photographs, the center, the apse in the center right now has doors in from either side.
Right.
And this clearly shows just a door in from the right.
There's one door there. There's a door here now.
Right, which doesn't show here. And I think there's a reason for that, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. But like the Station of the Cross, the original, they're still there today.
Yeah, they survived all the changes.
Yeah, yeah.
This, of course, doesn't begin to address the rich artwork on the walls that was just amazing. So,
And we can talk about that a little later, because
Sure.
there was a ton of artwork on the church when it opened, and again they painted over all of it, but
in 1962, yeah, or 63.
I don't even know when, but
Yeah.
they're not. That's 1880. They're gone.
Right. Well, no, they were there in the 60s when I was there.
Okay.
So
well, there's still some in the naves at the top, but
Yeah.
the big ones.
Now this is where you mentioned the pulpit would have been. This is the
Well, no, that's the epistle
left side altar.
Yeah, that's the epistle side.
Okay.
The left side would be where the
Okay.
there are two side altars.
Okay. Yes, this one.
And this is the only
came
one
later, I think, because
yeah.
there was a door there.
They both came later.
Okay.
This is the only one I can find out when it came and what it represented. It came in around 1920, and it was dedicated to a priest. We only had 3 priests that served as pastors for more than 20 years in 155 years. There's only been 3 guys. And this guy's name was Billings, and after he finished and passed away, his successor put this altar up for him.
Nice.
Now back then you had to have different altars if you wanted to concelebrate a mass, because you could only have 1 priest at the altar. So if you wanted to have multiple priests, you had to have multiple altars. So we had 3, so we could do 3 concelebrants.
Mm-hmm.
But that changed with Vatican II. In
They
the
could
60s.
share.
They could share the same altar. So it basically makes the side altars,
Superfluous.
yes, unless
But
you're
nice.
doing masses all day long,
But
you know, like
nice.
St. Peter's or
Right.
Arch Street in Boston. But
Yeah.
but they're not used. They're just there for decorative purposes. This is the one.
This is
the
the
gospel
earlier
side.
one.
Yeah, I have no idea where that came from or what it means or.
And this was on the pulpit side.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The pulpit would have been next to it. Further over.
Obviously, the more ornate of the 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, they're all marble. They all look like the same kind of marble. But,
Yeah. Interesting.
this is.
A more contemporary picture.
Yeah, this is the 100th anniversary in 1963.
At which point the whole church had gotten done over on
Right,
that side.
yeah,
New
new
pews,
pews.
new altar rails,
Right.
new altar.
New painting.
Well, and they changed the altar.
Yeah, they changed the altar.
Okay.
Well, it isn't changed yet, Doug. It's
No,
changed.
you're right.
It's changed after this, but that's something interesting to point out, that this ornate stuff, remember that, because we'll talk about that later.
Right.
But this is still, in 1963, the priest was still saying masses back to the people, to the congregation.
And it was
Yeah.
Monsignor Riley at this
Monsignor
point?
Riley
Okay.
was one of the 20 years. He was 1951 to 73. And he's the one that built the church, I mean the parish hall, the school, the convent, renovated the church almost the way it is now. I mean,
To a great deal.
yeah, see, the pulpit is gone. The pulpit was over here, and that's totally gone. You have the side altars.
We also see the cross
Yeah,
bracing
the
in
turnbuckles
here.
up here.
Yeah, the iron rods and turnbuckles, which you will not see in the older pictures.
No.
So,
I
yeah.
mean, that's a quick side story too about Henry Cahill. Again, this is pure speculation or rumors, but Henry Cahill, apparently when Monsignor Riley was starting to dress the church up when he came, felt that the church was falling apart.
Literally.
Literally. And he said, "You need to do something, Father." So Henry convinced Father Monsignor Riley that he should put these turnbuckles in and then put the buttresses on the outside.
The stone buttresses
Yeah.
running down
But
each side.
they're plaster of Paris. They're not even stone.
So they're not really doing much? Is that what you
Well,
think?
the current theory is they do nothing.
Okay.
This does nothing for the church. And never
Sounds
did.
about right.
I've asked, are there any engineering reports or structural engineering reports around that say that we had to do that? And
No.
there are none. And I could just see Henry saying, you know, we don't need those guys. They cost too much money. We could do this on our own. But currently, no one knows why. No one knows what they do. They don't really do anything. But on the other hand, nobody wants to take them down.
They wouldn't dare, the liability. Think about it. Now, personal story, I grew up in this church and I was around in the renovations that started in '63. But as a young child, when you're very low and very small, the only place you have to look in when you're in a pew is up. And I remember murals on the ceiling in the church. And so when the renovations were done and all of the fancy paint was covered over with this mottled beige paint, which was the latest thing at the time, all the modernization took away the dark wood, took away all of the frescoes, all of the murals, and gave us a textured interior that was much brighter, no argument. but a lot of the richness of the artwork went away. This also shows a door to either side of the altar. What I have learned through some of looking at what we're looking at is the left-hand door was much later, and my suspicion is the sacristy behind all of this only existed on this side of the building when it was first built, and was later extended to the other side. It all seems to be newer construction, and then they needed a door in from that side. But you're going to see in the older pictures, there's only a door to the right-hand side. And the same where the side altar is here. There was a door, there still is a door, but it was centered in that aisle, and it got moved over when the altar was put in. But again, that's where the sacristy was, not probably all the way across the back. So the things one learns.
Talking about the building, I want to just back up a second.
Sure.
About the original construction.
Shall I change slides, or are we good?
No, we're good.
Okay.
Originally, when they bought the property in 1862, in September, well, they had some fundraising activities, and by September they had enough money to dig a foundation. So they started digging a foundation in September. And at that time, they picked an architect, and the architect's name was James Murphy from Rhode Island. And at that time, he was only 29 years old and had come from Tipperary. So he was a relatively young guy and an immigrant himself. And it's believed that St. Bridget's was the first church he designed. But after St. Bridget's, he did over 30 in the Archdiocese of Boston. And in Providence, he was called the architect of the Archdiocese of Providence. He did a lot of churches there too. So the individual had a lot of churches under his belt. And so once he had developed the plans, the wood was delivered in June of 1863. So the foundation was started in September 1862 through the fall. The wood came in June, and at the first Thanksgiving Day, November 28, 1863, they consecrated the church. So they built it in like 5 months. And to me, that's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you have stained glass windows, you have marble altars, you have a pipe organ, you have all this stuff coming together, and it just must have been a very proud thing for the Irish immigrants here and the people in town to have that thing just pulled together so quickly. One of my other mysteries is why it was consecrated on a Thursday. The Catholic Church always treats Sunday as the day, as Sunday Mass, day of obligation, but the church was consecrated on a Thursday.
They could party more.
I don't know. The best thing I can come up with is there was a bishop from Connecticut that consecrated the church, and maybe he wanted to get back home and say Mass on Sunday. But no one. It just was coincidental. It just happened to be the first Thanksgiving ever.
Okay.
So that's
Interesting
an interesting little point.
Now, part of the original altar, what we believe is the original altar, is still there.
Yep.
And we're seeing it here.
Right.
Everything above this has changed through the years, but this part has remained constant.
This part has been moved twice. What happened is again with Vatican Council, you had to move. The priest had to move and face the congregation. And so what they did is the top of the altar, the ornate part, was put in the cellar, and no one knows where it went after that. It just disappeared. And
firewood.
Well, I don't know. Well, it was all marble. It was beautiful
that's true,
stuff.
it was, yeah.
This part, which is the original bottom of the altar, was cut up in pieces, and it was moved down the stairs closer to the people. And it was set up again, and the priest would face the people and use that as his table, so to speak, is what we had back then. In the 90s, though, I think the Archdiocese didn't like it, and so we had a very nervous moment in that we had to cut it up again and move it back to where it was. And today we celebrate on a table that Henry Cahill built the table in memory of his wife Lucy, and in fact Richard Donovan, who just passed away, when he moved, he donated the Oriental rug the table sits on. So the Oriental rug is from Mr. Donovan, and Mr. Cahill did the table. So this thing has been amazing how it survived, that bottom piece, and we thought it would fall apart
So far, so good.
the second time that they moved it.
So far, so good. It has survived.
And this
That
is
looks rather contemporary.
Yeah,
I
this is
see
how-
organ speakers.
yeah,
and-
that's how it looked at the 150th. The Father Butler passed it. For some reason, didn't he threw the organ out without asking us. All of a sudden, somebody came up and
One
took it
pipe
away.
organ gone.
Gone,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
He told me it was too expensive, and I said, well, Father, it would have been nice if we had shot it, maybe seeing if we could fix it, but I really think he wanted to get the sound system that's up here,
Right.
and the organ is over here now.
Right.
I really believe he wanted to just get rid of the pipe organ and get a more modern sounding organ. It can do all the, what do you call those?
It has
It can trumpets.
MIDI and
yeah,
everything
all kinds
else.
of things.
Musical
Yeah.
instrument digital interface. Yes.
I firmly believe that Father Butler wanted to do that now.
A more contemporary instrument.
Yes. The cloth background is something that's, I think, is being required by the liturgical people at the diocese, because a lot of churches are doing that. Behind that cloth is a gorgeous,
It's marble, isn't it?
no, it's, what do you call the inlaid things? The
A tile?
tiles, it's
Okay.
tile.
Okay.
It's a blue tile with pictures of wheat and grapes,
Okay.
and it's really pretty.
And covered over.
Yeah, and this part, which is interesting, now, which you can see because the ornate top went away, is, in my opinion, is all Connemara marble.
Nice.
And you cannot buy Connemara marble today in that size. You can only get little tiny bits and pieces. It's all been mined out. These statues are interesting because they're made of plaster of Paris. You can pick them up.
They're not marble.
Yeah, it's funny. You can pick those things up.
You can.
But we had brass railings earlier. It's gone now, and that's the table that Henry built.
The table that Henry built.
Yeah.
We'll call it that from now on.
Well, that's what it is. Yeah.
There it is, the table that Henry built.
It's a gorgeous piece of work. You put a lot of love and time into it. You really spent a lot of time on it.
Excellent.
And if you just get to see it, it's pretty. Now we have the stained glass windows.
With fleur-de-lis.
Yeah, this is one of my mysteries that I'm not sure I've solved, or I don't think I'll ever solve, but I have a theory. There are 16 windows in the church, and all of them have this fleur-de-lis pattern, which it's Irish immigrants building a church to St. Bridget's.
And they're not shamrocks.
They're not shamrocks. I mean, why fleur-de-lis, which is it's the symbol of the French king. And at the top of each one of the stained glass windows, there's a different design, and that one happens to be the symbol for the name of the holy name of
Holy
Jesus.
name, yeah.
Yeah, but each one's different, and I don't know. My theory on the fleur-de-lis is the first bishop of Boston was a Bishop Chevreuse, and he came from New York City and was bishop here for about 15 years. I think he left around 1850, and he went back to France. He was a Frenchman, and he became a cardinal in France. And in fact, when Boston College was founded in 1863, one of the main buildings is called Chevreuse Hall. And there is a medal that the Archdiocese gives out that one of our parishioners received last Sunday called the Chevreuse Medal. So I'm just thinking maybe as a nod to the French first bishop of Boston, the fleur-de-lis. But
And
again, now this one's kind of interesting. I find it interesting. It's another good story. Again, there's the fleur-de-lis. The colors change in each window, but the fleur-de-lis is the same dominating feature. In the late 1880s, Father Hickey decided that the windows had all faded, and besides that, we wanted to winterize them. They were the old slide window, sash windows.
Double hung, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we took them all out, and they were sent away to Boston to be restored. And again, we didn't have any plans for what the windows, what they were originally or where they came from. And this window in particular, whatever was up there was faded, and nobody knew what to put back. So Father Hickey, in his infinite wisdom, decided to put the Hickey lion from his coat of arms.
Ultimate power, you know?
Again, the priest could basically do anything they want, as you can see. So, and he didn't do it surreptitiously. He told us all.
He announced it.
He announced it at Mass. He said, "That's my Hickey
By
lion."
the way.
And we couldn't find out what was there, and it was too faded. And I decided to leave my legacy with the church. So.
In a window.
In a window. It's a nice little story. I think he was a good guy.
But the artwork goes throughout, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a good outside shot. Okay.
Yeah, and this is
very blue skies.
This shows all this stuff is like plaster of Paris. That again, I believe Henry Cale did. There's the buttresses.
Stuccoed, yeah.
Yeah, it's just they don't do anything.
And I mean, all of us who grew up with this have gotten used to the fact that the road drops in front of the church. That's not original. Originally, the road was up at the higher level, and they dropped it to go under the railroad. And really, I think on this line, it's the only place where the road goes under the track. I mean, in Weymouth it goes over.
Yeah, on this line you're right. They did it in Braintree at Pearl Street. They did the same thing. They dropped it way down.
Yeah, but you're right. That's the only other place I can think of. But so it's unusual, but they did it here, and we're going to see some pictures where before it was dropped, and also the niche, and there's the cross you had talked about that had originally been at the back.
Yeah, and of course the niche is St. Bridget at the top.
As it should be. And the rose window there for years was hidden behind the pipe organ.
Right.
You never.
That was the only good thing when you took throughout the
you got to see this.
Got to see this beautiful.
Yeah. But beyond that,
it was just unfair that he didn't give us a chance.
And
to keep it.
we see a touch of the new rectory that was built for this site.
Right.
After the Dunham house was moved away. Oh, that's cool. And this is some of the artwork that is in the stained glass windows.
Yeah, I hope to bring a box of the commemorative books with me. I have a few, but they were thrown out last week.
Timing is everything.
Yeah,
they sat there for years and they were thrown out last week.
I would have got them, but they had like 2 big boxes and there were plenty of them. But this is interesting because this shows you, and I have a key to that. But
it's actually in the book, yeah.
In the book there's another page, but this side is the top. I told you about the top of each stained glass window has a different symbol.
Like a chevron at the very top.
See,
of the point,
there's a hickey lion, and each one, and these paintings are on either side of the aisles up above, and they represent the saints and some evangelists. Like this, like that's Saint Mark, and the keys of Saint Peter. I've got the key here someplace. If you want to ask me later, it's in the book. If you want to ask me later, I can explain what it all means. But I'd hope to give you all a book.
Best laid plans. We are going to make some available. If we don't have them today, there's still a few more out there. So if you're interested, check back here at the Dyer. It's an excuse to get you back in. Anyway, let's not do questions yet. I want to actually change slideshow and show you some of the glass slide stuff that we have come across here.
This stuff's really interesting. We just saw it last week.
This is new to you. I had seen some of it before, but unfortunately, and some of you know, we weren't able to find it in time for the booklet that came out, because some of this stuff would have been just amazing to feature. And let me get this thing started. Slideshow. Come on, baby. Start from the beginning. And let's do that. So this image, of course, is the outside of the building. It was taken near the intersection of Plymouth Street and Central Street. Yep. Looking back at the church before there were buttresses, while there was still a steeple, while the cross was still in the back. But other than that, I mean, and there's also some change around the doors. There was a widening to the bases. I'm not quite sure why, but it was relatively a simple exterior. It had some nice trim.
Those are the original stairs.
Yes.
Still there.
Oh yeah, they are. It's just everything in front of them changed.
Yeah.
We'll have to go through the card announcing the lecture. We lightened it up a little bit so you can see it, but that's kind of it. This is an interior shot taken from the balcony. It's difficult with negatives. I'll share this with you. Very easy to reverse them, the glass negatives, and so you needed a cue and a clue from each one. Am I reading it forwards? Am I reading it backwards? And as I was working with these, one of the easy things is which way is the lamb facing on the altar? Yeah. And also, if you could make it out, is the door on the right-hand side of the altar? Because it's supposed to be, and it is. But just look how ornate this is. You know.
Now this has got to be pretty close to the beginning, because the gas lights were installed here, and that was in the 1880 picture I showed.
But yet there was some sort of heating system because there's a grate in the floor.
Right.
So
they put the lights right on top of the grate.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. But the ornate This is incredible.
Now this one is enough of a vertical that it's beginning to show us some of the paintings above the arch.
Can you see the statues on the other one?
Oh yeah.
Because the statues are covered up here.
Sorry?
The ones I spoke of up here. That's Saint Philomena. And
With a
she's-
child.
With a child. She's the patron saint of youth. And that's Saint Anne over there. I mean, they were pretty sizable statues to be hung up, to be stuck up
To
there.
be stuck up on the wall.
You know, they didn't have any lifts back then.
This was less clear than I'd like it to be.
Yeah.
That looks better, doesn't it?
Yeah, that looks better. And then this is the sanctuary light, which is phenomenal. Doug has a picture of it later, but it's a beautiful piece of work. And when the sanctuary light was lit, it meant the body of Christ is in the tabernacle of the church.
And it hangs from way up.
It hangs from way up high.
Yeah.
This
In
is-
order to get it forward enough.
And this is the paintings that have been all painted over.
Over, yeah, on the ceiling and everywhere else.
And on the side, when you get to the side picture, you'll see, well, you can see one over here. On the sides, they had paintings of the apostles and the evangelists, they tell me.
Above the arches.
Yeah, above
And
the
under the
arches.
windows.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this looks like an angel to me.
Mhm.
But they had like the Annunciation and the baptism of Christ. They had a whole bunch of different scenes throughout the church. I mean, even on the ceiling, I guess.
Yeah, that's actually where the baptism was. It was on the
And,
ceiling.
Yeah, they disappeared pretty quick. I mean,
They got painted over.
Yeah.
They did. How's that for an ornate altar?
unbelievable.
And again, we've got the lamb facing the right direction, so we know it's good. The other fun thing is the pews are numbered.
Yeah.
You know, it's something we are used to seeing in Protestant churches, but not so much in Catholic churches. But here they are, they're numbered. Now, something that I wanted to point out to you, you thought this might be gaslight or whatever. These are electric fixtures to either side of the altar.
think so?
Well, that is, yeah.
Okay.
So we're seeing some
That's the
electricity.
sanctuary lamp. You can see it's all crystal, and again, there's no record of where that went. You know, why it came down or where
They
it
just didn't need it anymore.
Yeah, we just have a simple light to the left of the altar now.
The red one, right?
Yeah, the red one. That's
Yeah,
it. There's
absolutely.
nothing like that.
I like that one better.
Yeah.
I just took part of the negative and just
that's the stuff.
enlarged it to begin to get a sense of what was going on here. Unfortunately, the negative's not
See,
in the best of
that's
shape.
the
but
sanctuary lamp
Going
tied
all the way
up
up.
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
they did have some designs over the altar.
Yeah.
Right now it's all plain. But it's interesting how ornate they made it.
It polychromed like
Yeah,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah.
Every inch was like covered. This is a very unusual view because most churches we get to see looking straight up or down the aisle, and this one not. This one is taken from the west. I'm sorry, the east aisle, looking over to the west corner, and this was at one point where the pulpit would have been.
Yeah, the pulpit would have been right around here, I think.
Right, but of course we're
But I
looking
can't
at
see it.
we're looking at the first additional altar on
And
the
the paintings
side.
are up here. You can see some of them.
Yeah, you're beginning to see those in there
Yeah.
too. And again, the lamp here, it's right at the edge of the
right
picture,
there.
going all the way up. Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
That's something else I'd forgotten. I believe to either side of the altar there was a niche with a statue in it of an angel,
Yep.
and this I can see one of them here, but those are gone too.
And we don't know where they went.
No. That could be the story, that could be the title of this lecture. This is from my personal collection because
Yeah.
back when I was in high school, I had the privilege of learning to play the pipe organ at St. Bridget's. And no one ever turned around and photographed the organ, but since I was playing it, I did. It was a Stevens and Sons out of Cambridge, a tracker action organ, and without getting too much into how pipe organs work, nowadays a lot of them, when you touch a key, an electronic device opens up a valve to a pipe which makes the sound. A pipe organ's a big box of whistles, if I could simplify it in any easy way. But back then it was all mechanical, and the more groups of pipes you turned on, the harder it came to press those keys. And to someone who had been trained on electronic instruments where it didn't matter what was turned on, they all pressed the same, at this point you were pounding the keys if you were playing Joy to the World with everything turned on. So it was a very different experience. But Stevens organs were good. There weren't that many of them around. I don't think there was another one in Abington that I'm aware of. Danny, do you know of one?
I was under the assumption that the Universalist one
Oh, was it Stevens as well?
Stevens,
Okay, okay, that would have been the second in town.
Stevens that were taken out in '67.
Okay.
I've heard rumors that that still is in the South Shore someplace now.
That this organ is?
Yeah, I called Father Butler, and he's away. I thought maybe he might be able to tell me where it is. But
Sure.
it seems like it went somewhere. It didn't just go to the junkie.
This is kind of the blending of the old and the new. They painted most of the case the new lighter colors, but left the key desk the original dark colors. And the keyboard was built right into the organ case, so, and not unusual for organs of this time. The only way you could see the alto was through a mirror over your head, so everything was backwards, but you could see everything going. It was the best seat in the house, because it was like the highest seat in the house, but everything was reversed, and you also couldn't see what was going on underneath you, under the balcony. But this was the magnificent instrument. When I was playing it, Helen T. Leyden had been the organist there for many years. And a cute story that pipe organs have to be maintained, and they're not cheap to maintain. And the gentleman, I think it was Mr. White from Randolph, who was doing the maintenance, knew that Helen never, ever, ever used the trumpet stop. It was too loud. So she never touched it. And I love the trumpet stop. So usually every Christmas when you were playing that Joy to the World as everyone was leaving, I'd pull on the trumpet. It was so out of tune, my ears could bleed. But it was loud. So it kind of didn't matter because it was loud and a fun thing to do. So anyway, I also wanted, this was in our glass negative collection as well. There were several of priests in rectories, and it looked like they lived well. There's a dog in this one. I guess you could have pets. There's another one with, you know, champagne on the table as they're all gathered around. But
that priest has the Roman collar on. A lot of them don't like to wear it now. They wear it's a simpler collar.
Oops.
They don't wear the Roman collars that much.
Yeah, but probably commonplace back then. Yeah. So we have about 3 of the priests in the rectory. We have 3 or 4 of an altar that I think we actually mistakenly put up on the Dyer site saying, you know, view of. We don't know where the altar is. It's probably not St. Bridget's, but it's similar to St. Bridget's altars, but the context is wrong.
It goes to Holy Family.
Yeah, no, the context is wrong. It's sitting in a bit of an apse, but different shape, different doors, different whatever. Very nice pictures, but they're not St. Bridget's, as near as we can tell. So another mystery. But when you start getting these old photographs, the mysteries are there. But so we were very excited to come across this collection, be able to share it with you, because these pictures haven't been seen in decades. And they give us a good insight as to what it looked like long before I was born. So it's fun to see it back then. And yet, so much of the church is still recognizable. You know, I mean, the basic structure hasn't changed. It's mostly ornaments and fixtures, but the church itself, you know, wasn't greatly extended or shrunken or anything else. So it looks much as it did from the whole body of the church. Anyway, what haven't we covered? It is probably time for questions.
I've covered everything I had.
You're good. Well, why don't we have lights, if you could, sir? You know where they are now. You're a pro. Thank you. And ask if there are any questions. I see a lot of parishioners here. I'll start with you because you're close.
Okay. I wanted to know, the pastors of the church, would they be diocesan priests?
Well, most of them were. Father Butler, who was 2 pastors, 1 pastor ago, before Father Mahoney, he was a Holy Father priest, Stonehill College.
Okay.
And he apparently wanted to, he grew up in Whitman, so he apparently wanted to serve as an archdiocese priest. He was at St. Francis Xavier in Weymouth before he came to us. But they were all basically back then diocesan priests, yes.
Okay.
They
Because
were
not
trained.
all Catholic churches, like was one in Brockton that was not part of the archdiocese. It was.
Is that one of the ethnic ones?
Yes, yes.
They had
then
Lithuanian and
that's Polish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Polish. They did, yes, but a lot of them merged later on.
And then I wanted to know about the sanctuary light. Was that gas or was that a candle?
I think it's a candle.
We've been led to
so
believe
they'd
it's
have
a
to pull
candle.
it down.
Yeah.
That would be a
It was
stretch.
suspended up from way above, but yes.
And could you tell me anything about the convent? I know we're talking about the church, but about the convent. Who were the nuns that ran it and what grades?
Yes,
Was
this
it?
is a divine providence.
It's what?
Sisters of Divine Providence out of Kingston, am I
Yeah,
correct?
because the Sacred Heart School down there is all Sisters of Divine
Right.
Providence
Right.
nuns. And they were also
then-
at St. Francis in Weymouth.
Yes, they're the
And
same
when
nuns
we
there.
closed, our nuns moved to
Right.
Weymouth.
But we ran out of nuns.
We ran out.
So then it became a friary. We were able to rent it to the Capuchins, and they used it as a retirement home.
Father McWade was a brilliant man with that. He rented it to the Capuchin Franciscans for $1 a year.
Yeah,
And
but we
in
got
turn-
priests.
Huh?
We got
and
priests.
in turn, we had a younger priest that was in charge of the Franciscans.
Yeah.
All of the other priests were elders, basically retirement age, and they served our parish.
Right.
They not only said a mass, morning masses or a weekend mass, we had the small chapel at that time in the
Yeah,
convent.
in the convent.
And they said that they were the most wonderful group of people that we had for 10 years there. They varied, I mean, they were much elder, but they were incredible.
They
to the
visit
parish.
people in the community, and they were really good. They were
It
very-
served a need.
Yeah, very charitable
Mm.
I
people.
was baptized in that little convent.
Were you?
Really neat.
I didn't know they did any
In
of
the
that.
little
Is that right?
chapel?
In the chapel?
Yeah.
Wow. But the chapel they used during the 70s when we had the problem with heating and oil and everything, they used the chapel during Lent for the Mass every morning. And
For the
didn't-
daily Mass.
They didn't open the church
Mhm.
during Lent to do the 40 days.
Much easier.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Clay, you have?
The Father Hickey you referred to, is that the same John Hickey from Rockland?
No, it's Gerald Hickey. He just recently died last month. He had to have been 6'9" or 10, 400 pounds.
Well,
A large man.
At the Chapel for Patriots.
Right.
Yes, he was a great guy. Great guy. There was some controversy in that he was accused by some of his nephews of doing something like 40
Oh.
years ago,
Oh.
and the archdiocese removed him, and he was exonerated later on, and they never publicly acknowledged that.
Huh.
I don't know
Sad.
why, but he ended his life. He lived in Situ. He just died recently, and he went to the prison. He was serving the prison as a priest.
He did
but
service, before a lot of the controversy came about, he was, as a retired priest, offering mass in some of the South Shore parishes that
yeah,
were
yeah.
shorthanded of priests.
But I don't know why they didn't like him. But I mean, his obituary in the Globe last month didn't even say he was a priest.
Wow. That's sad.
Yeah, it was very sad. But I did find out, I missed his mass. I would have liked to go on the funeral, that they did have 7 priests, 7, Joe,
Yeah.
at the funeral.
Wow.
So they recognized him that way. But he was a great guy. He used to give a sermon, and a 30-minute sermon, and I remembered it on Wednesday. I mean,
Stayed with you.
I thought that was pretty good. And then
I think so too.
then he left us with a lion in the stained glass window.
Well, there's something. Okay,
Yeah.
so now he's remembered for something else.
What years was he serving?
He was in the late 80s. I think he left, my daughter was married in 88. He married her. He might have left like 90, 91.
He married both my kids in different churches.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he went to different churches too. 'Cause-
Janet,
Where is the Caroline located that plays at noontime?
the speaker,
Is that
because
on
it's
top of the
electronic, is on top of the
Rectory.
rectory. That's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all electronic?
Yes,
like a
most of them are now, yeah. The tape.
They
I have the
play
one
the German national anthem too.
Well, yes, it's Haydn's Glorious Things of the Air Spoken, but other people know it as Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. It's the same melody, but it had very different uses. Most of the churches have chime tapes now. I know the Baptist does, and I actually have the one from the Congregational Church in Whitman. They're across the street from Holy Ghost, and they both had chimes, and they were both set to go off at noon. It was kind of a mess.
Yeah, we
So ultimately, they moved theirs to go off 10 after the hour, and when they took the speaker down and redo the roof, they just never put it back, saying it kind of didn't make any sense. It was kind of covered. So, but it's really unusual to find real bells out there now doing that. The tapes do it well. Don.
Yeah, one of the pieces of art that I like that's still in the church, I suspect it's original, is the wall between the foyer and the main body of the church.
That makes the narthex. I actually don't believe that was, because I think in the 63 history, which I kind of grew up with, they mentioned when that was installed.
Okay.
It was early.
It's very
Don't get me
nice.
wrong. It's
Yeah.
beautifully carved and frosted glass, if I remember correctly, both.
Yeah.
But-
Originally, that area of the church, when it first opened, was the library.
Interesting.
And they had a library for the parishioners, and they could come and borrow books.
Within that small foyer?
That front foyer was
It's
a library.
long. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very wide. It's not very,
Yeah, it
very
was a
deep,
library.
but it's the whole end of the church under the balcony.
Yeah.
So yeah,
The front with the back.
Yeah.
basically, yeah.
And Henry Cahill built the restroom out of the same type of stuff.
Yes.
We have the most ornate restroom in the South Shore.
It was better than the broom closet.
Yeah, yeah,
That we had up until then. Yes, I remember that under the stairs.
yeah.
It was like Harry Potter under the stairs.
And
That's where the chamber
barely-
pot was.
Barely
So
could go in and close the door.
and it was bad. Anyway, so it was an improvement. Actually, probably accessible. God help us.
Just one other question. Now, St. Bridget's is linked up with Holy Ghost
Mhm.
in Whitman. How's that going?
Oh, it's going really well. The problem is, I have some personal feelings. I'm the chairman of the parish finance council too. And I think what the church went around and closed churches because of lack of participation and priests, and they found out that really wasn't the way to do things. So they began clustering churches in threes. And we were clustered with Holy Family and Holy Ghost, but the priest in Rockland got an exemption until he retires, that they would not join us to be together. It's going well in that we can centralize things like the bookkeeping, the paying the bills, the payroll. It's all done by the same person now in both places. The CCD program, they're phasing that in. The problem as I see it is that what's going to happen is if we do end up with Rockland coming, there'll be 3 churches, 3 rectories. Well, there were 2 schools, 3 cemeteries, 2 parish halls, and there's absolutely no way we're going to be able to support all that. And I think the church is having us make the choice.
Instead of them closing something, they're going to leave it up to the clustered churches to figure out how to make a go of it.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And I think in the future you're going to see, which should have happened but it hasn't yet, one of the rectories will be a rectory where the priest will live. Right now we have 2 and 1 retired priest. The priest will live in a rectory and they really should be left alone. I mean, those rectories are 24/7. People coming in and out. So the idea is to put them in one rectory to live in. A second rectory would be the business office and the administrative offices of the cluster of churches, or the collaborative as they call it officially. And then we're going to have to sell the 3rd rectory.
Mhm.
And they're making us decide what stays and what goes, which I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but it's just the lack of priests is getting tough. Right now we just had one of our priests got pulled to go to St. Francis Xavier in Weymouth because that priest got ill and he's gone for 8 weeks and he's the only priest there. And they're selling their rectory and their parking lot and everything over there in South Weymouth.
They've got a buyer too, don't they? Yeah.
There's a for sale sign in the rectory.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody lives in the rectory, I guess, but
And that's the one that's across the street on the
Yeah.
opposite corner, not like
Yeah.
ours that's on the
So I mean,
property.
Yeah.
things are
This
really
is on
not
the
good.
dangerous corner.
And,
All the churches are having
Yeah,
difficulty.
well, they need priests, but I mean, that's the future as I see it. It's working well, it really is. We have a member from the Whitman Church on the Finance Council as well as members from the Abington Church, and we seem to be working well, and it's saving a little money. I just think that the ultimate purpose is to make us decide what to get rid of.
And what to hang on to and how to blend.
Yeah, how to blend it.
But I mean, I think better local than letting someone else.
But there's never a good answer to that.
No, of course there isn't, but at least it's going to be an
Somebody
answer that you're arriving at
Yeah.
together.
Well,
so.
if you pick a church, if you can't keep 3 churches going, which
Yeah.
one do you get rid of?
Yeah.
Which one do you close? And gee, that's the one I got married in, and it's really difficult.
Yeah.
Well, St. Bridget's too is, out of the 3 churches in the 3 towns, is the only one that doesn't have a downstairs church.
Right.
Holy Family and Holy Ghost both have another church downstairs. One used for perpetual adoration in Whitman, the other one is used like morning masses and stuff in Rockland. We just have a stinky, smelly, dirty,
Right.
probably hazardous waste, oil spilling or something down in the water. There's nothing down there.
It's a dirt floor.
And we are the oldest.
And the downstairs of the rectory is not much better. If you go into the basement of that, it's pretty.
And we are the oldest wooden church in Plymouth County, wooden Catholic church. But we also, on the other hand, in the entire Archdiocese of Boston, St. Bridget's is in the top 10 for sacramentals, which is baptisms, weddings, funerals. we're in the top 10.
They stay busy.
Yes.
Who's for us?
Rah rah.
Now, maybe more funerals than baptisms, but, but
Funny how
that's-
that works.
yeah, but that's a good point as far as which church you would close. You-
Yeah.
You would look at the one that has
Which
the
which
most-
one's busiest too?
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. I saw Joe Shea with his hand.
Yeah, because I remember when they were talking about closing it, when Father Butler was there,
2004.
St. Bridget's was on the list to be closed at one point. And
Yes.
I know Liz and I got together up here, we got a petition up to keep it going. And we did some research, and the statistics, there was looking at comparing to other churches, there was no reason why St. Bridget should have been on that list. So I think, I'd rather the local people make it than the archdiocese.
Mm.
One other thing you mentioned Helen Blyden.
Helen, yes.
I had her in the 5th grade.
She was a math teacher in Quincy.
No, she was a 5th grade teacher at the North School.
Oh, North. Okay, I thought.
She taught there, she always had her white gloves on.
Okay.
She was an older woman, way hair in a bun. Her brother was a doctor. Dr.
Mark.
Mark
Mark,
Blyden.
absolutely.
And of course, my brother Johnny had her several years after I did. When the Supreme Court came out and said, no more reading prayers, she kept right on doing it. I went on desk and said a prayer every
That's Helen.
Who was going to say anything?
To Helen, no one would dare. She lived right around the corner from the church on Park Avenue.
No,
So-
Bell Circle. Helen, I think she originally was on Park Avenue. But I remember she was on Bell Circle.
In the 1970s, she was definitely on Park Avenue because I went to her house many times to get music.
I may be wrong.
Okay. I still have a piece she hand wrote out for me in her perfect penmanship. So. You're not thinking Rachel Lydon, are you?
I'm thinking of Rachel.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. They were similar. They were. But no, Helen, I believe, was a math teacher in Quincy. And as I said, perfect penmanship, perfect everything. And trust me, if they were saying prayers in school, she would have done it too. So they were cut from the same cloth. But anyhow, that concludes our program. Thank you. Well done. He was nervous about doing this, and I told him he had nothing to be nervous about. Yeah, absolutely. So
I had too many unanswered questions, is the problem. Anybody finds the answer to some of these questions, let me know.
He's good. Anyway, we have refreshments in the back room. We want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We'll be working in the background on membership issues and everything during the course of the winter, but we will see you back here in March for our spring series of programs going on. Remember volunteerism, we always need help. Remember us in membership-wise. If you haven't paid your dues, please do. We could use the money. But meanwhile, please head out in the back room and we'll catch you back there. Thank you all.
Thank you.